Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some PathOfExile discussion. Today I wanted to demonstrate the build that I leak started. This is not yet in a position where I can say this is definitely a guide to it. This is just an outline of what's been doing so far. I wanted to take it for a spin in a Pit of the Chimera map that has 80% delirious 8 mods, and also to give you a quick outline of the expensive things in the build. I have a near perfect rolled The Surrender, which I got for the steal price of 3.5 divines. I feel like with a 484 roll on it, it should probably have been more like 6. And I also have one other thing that may be quite hard to replicate, and that is the Forbidden Duel combo for Measured Retaliation in the Gladiator Ascendancy. That said, there's also some really scuffed things at the moment, like an absolutely terrible Amulet that is holding things together in the build, but that is not inherently good. Side note, if you're wondering why this is 8 mod and delirious, it's because I used Delirium Scarab of Delusion and Cartography Scarab of Corruption in order to get it to drop. I'm not going to bother with scarabs on this, I'm just going to run it as is, with Maven Witness of course, because that's one of the things that you want to be doing with any of these Guardian maps. So in we go to the pit. This will demonstrate how the Eviscerate Gladiator is feeling in some reasonably juicy mapping. You'll see there that once the Eviscerate goes off, there's a lot of damage, and we've got block that's allowing us to just pretty much stand in front of things. I'm needing to tap a life flask every now and again in the 80% delirious world. If it was lower deli, I wouldn't need to. And we've got Kosis here, who is annoying. I probably won't bother actually fighting Kosis because I'm not delirium spec'd at the moment. I've been generating these maps, but I haven't actually been optimizing the running of them yet. Kosis takes a while, and without the rewards on him, I don't think he's really that worthwhile to actually kill. Omniphobia, on the other hand, Omniphobia is less of a pain than Kosis is. We're going to tap this Shrine. Shrines are fantastic. You also notice I just picked up a huge amount of action speed, and that is because I got one of the crazy good shrines that gives you an action speed boost. You're going to leave those bosses behind, not because we can't kill them, but because they're only going to drop 6 Simulacrum Splinters each, and I'm not that fussed about that. So we'll go forward and do the actual real map boss, which is what you want to see. That's not Diala's Malefaction. No, it is not. But it's worth checking. At least I think Diala's is worth something this league. Should be. Baylor Mages think is still playing his Holy Relic build, and it's very, very good on that. If this wasn't an 8 mod map, and it wasn't 80% delirious, you'd find that these monsters would not really be doing any appreciable damage. Instead, I would be blocking and recovering enough life from the Surrender in order to cover all of the damage I'm taking. I have a couple of DPS upgrades available to me. I'm trying to make a particularly good Calandra Amulet fit, but at the moment I can't make it fit because of intelligence requirements. That's why I'm using the absolutely scuffed Amulet that I have on at the moment, is that it has the intelligence that character needs, and I don't really want another thing that's just a temporary fix to that on a permanent fix, which is probably going to be getting 2 more character levels. When I hit 96, I will have access to a couple of things that will fix me up on that front. Alright, so we'll just keep punching through here. Those Bismuth Tornadoes are actually quite useful to basically use as a bit of a battery to replenish life off, because the Surrender will replenish you a whole lot of life when you're in it. Reservations wise, at the moment I am currently using Determination, which is an odd choice for this build, but I'm liking it because I'm using Cast on Damage Taken Molten. A lot of people who would be playing this would run Pride instead, and I certainly won't say they're wrong to do so. I have Vitality socketed but not currently turned on, and that's something that I like having as an option, because Vitality is then something that I can turn on. It takes up too much mana for it to be comfortable. But if I take a lot of damage in certain scenarios, I can just go, alright, Vitality on, and recover a bunch of life while running around. That's something that I will be trying to fit a lower rank Vitality in once we get the changes going. Flasks are scuffed currently, as you can see. I am, however, needing to use my Corrupting Blood Cleanse Flask. I am immune to traditional bleed, but I have no resilience to Corrupting Blood at the moment, and that's a sort of sketchy spot to be in sometimes, as I've taken a few situations in this map where I've taken a lot of damage from Corrupting Blood. That's fixable, but it's also something that I don't really have a plan to fix, because the typical place you would fix Corrupting Blood is on a traditional jewel that is corrupted. I might potentially try and get a corrupted version of my current cluster jewel. That might be the one to use. That's not the Sublime one. Oh, Calandra Mist. It's the RNG version, and it is genuinely quite bad. The inverse will be bad as well. It's just low numbers on it, low tier rolls. The item that I'm intending to use as an amulet is actually from the RNG Calandra Mist. So it's not one that was intentionally created out of the Calandra content. It's one that was that came out in the same way that that ring that I just rejected there was. And it has a tremendous amount of chaos res on it, because I'm currently -5 chaos res while I'm running through this map. Tremendous amount of chaos res, and also has the other thing that's important to me, which is the dot multi on it. 59% dot multi, 75% chaos res, and a bunch of genuinely severe drawbacks on it. I'm going to try and make it work, but it's not something that's replaceable, so I'm not going to advocate you use it. It's something that if I end up using, you'll need to find another alternative for. That guy's being a pain. I might just stand in the Bismuth Tornado where I can... Oh, actually, let's get out of there. The Bismuth Tornadoes are an interesting mechanic here. They actually cause you to gain life over time. Here we go with the bosses. Maven's going to call in a bunch of extra bosses. Bismuth Tornadoes, they will actually cause you to gain life because you'll block them. A lot of the time, that'll trigger the Surrender, it'll trigger Tetsudo on the passive tree, and it will also trigger the 20 life, 20 mana Mastery recovery, which is the weakest of those effects, but still does something unique and useful in the mana recovery. So I really like running into them when they show up. They do add a bit of danger, because sometimes, you know, you're likely to block, but you don't always block. And so you got to keep that in mind, but they are really, really solid for that. Especially if you're taking damage over time. I'm very soft to damage over time currently. Now, this is going to have, being a Chimera, at one of the 3 intermission phases, our Chimera friend is going to summon a bunch of spitting snakes. Those could be quite sketchy. Additionally, I should probably get the Mirage of Bones down. There he goes, he's dead. Now we got to actually focus the Chimera himself down. Being 80% delirious, the guy's got 24% more life. Oh, sorry, 24% more damage than he normally would have. So he's normally completely a cakewalk in terms of damage, but with 80% deli, he does hit a little bit harder. I'm manually cursing, as you'll see occasionally being fired off here now that we're actually in a 1v1 scenario. And here, Pride would be superior to Determination. Okay, we've got the goats. That's a trivial fight. There's no real danger from them. At least there shouldn't be. And again, we've got our Bismuth battery up. Actually hitting harder than I was expecting there. Lucky block is great. It's not always up, and that's important to keep in mind. But it is up a lot of the time, and it's really good when it's up. Boss, I know, still one more of these things to kill. You'll notice that I just don't play the mechanics of that encounter at all. I know that that Chimera ability is a lot of small hits, so I just don't care that it's happening. That's intentional that I'm standing in that rather than getting out of the way. It's a lot of small hits. I'm going to block the vast majority of them. The Surrender's going to proc a lot of life recovery. And actually most of the damage I'm taking at the moment is from that blue Maven Orb that's chasing me around on the ground. Okay, second intermission. This is the Hellions, so we're still not at the point where we've got the sketchier ones for negative 5% chaos res. Now, that said, I did take a big hit there. The ignites on this, ignites are not something I've got solved, and for that matter, ailments in general are not something I've got solved. So I'm enduring ailments currently, and being ignited is actually pretty rude. Ignite's one of the easier of the ailments to fix, but I haven't fixed it. Freeze, however, is fixed. Freeze is the one that has to be fixed. That's dealt with via the Brine King Pantheon with the upgrade. Shock is currently the most severe ailment that I have to deal with, and I don't have any solution to it other than just being careful when I'm aware I'm shocked. The ignites I'm suffering are pretty bad, and they can all, and then I'm just enduring chills. Chills are, because I've got the frenzy charge scaling on the character, not so much on bosses but in trash, frenzy charges provide a bunch of action speed that counteracts that a bit, especially with the cluster down at the south end of the tree. Alright, I'm going into hiding phase. Oh no, it's not that one, it's there. And it'll go to 25% in a sec. I think one of the key things here that you'll see is that this character is extremely defensively set up. At least in softcore, it's one of those characters that feels ridiculously tanky. A couple things can go wrong. You can get one shot to a big spell because I have no suppression, and you also can get one shot to melee slams. Like, the defenses line up very poorly against the Shaper, for example, but against monsters like this, the defenses are very solid. The damage is, it's reasonable, but it's not anything extraordinary. And 80% delirious means that the trash monsters have 70-something% damage reduction against you. The boss monsters have, I believe, 64%. So the Chimera essentially takes a bit over 1 million damage before any healing that he receives in order to slay. And of course I got Culling Strike, which is something that's an absolute godsend on tankier bosses like this. Let's just go stand in the battery for a bit. Drop down my banner. I'm not really using the banner very much. It does the job, but... And there we go, that's the cull. Alright, so that's an 80% Delirious 8 mod Chimera with this setup. I don't think this is perfect as yet, but there's a few things we want to discuss in terms of upgrades. This is the Amulet that I want to use. It obviously has a very severe drawback, lose 127.7 life per second. It also has 75 Chaos Res, which is a godsend. It has enough dexterity to fix problems on my build. It has 59% dot multi, which is incredible, but it also does not have any intelligence on it, and that means I can't use it right now. I am using this completely scuffed amulet that I've just been happy with for a long time because it solves a lot of problems. It has 55 intelligence. That is all it is. 55 int, 55 life, and of course, Crushing Reply, which is a phenomenal anoint that costs you well under 1 chaos. It makes Eviscerate so much better. Retaliation skills Fortify on melee hit means that when I'm clearing maps that aren't 80% delirious like this, I'm sitting at 20 fortification. I am using Jack the Axe as my weapon. Jack the Axe is an interesting weapon. It is very hard to beat on bleed builds. It's not unbeatable, but it's very hard to beat. The key thing with it is this Thirst for Blood skill reserves 10% of your life in exchange to give you some, well, firstly, it gives you a whole bunch of extra damage, but secondly, it also gives you something akin to Life Leech, but for bleed. Very, very strong. The other thing that made a lot of things come together was Venipuncture, and I need to upgrade this Venipuncture to instead have a useful Val implicit on it. But we've got 53% increased damage while bleeding, which is with bleeding, which is a big deal. Also allows you to slow things by inflicting chill on them. Non-chilled enemies you inflict bleeding on are chilled. That's fantastic. And there's a number of other lines of text on it. You are chilled while you are bleeding would be a drawback, except we don't actually care about that because we are using the Evasion and Armor Mastery from the Cloth and Chain cluster that allows you to have to be outright immune to classic bleed as long as your helmet's armor is higher than your helmet's evasion rating. In terms of other things we're using, we have our main setup at the moment is Eviscerate. Eviscerate in a 6-link, a link to brutality, melee fears, cruelty, chance to bleed support, which is probably something that, like, this doesn't feel all that good and should probably go. I've been investigating Swift Affliction and I don't like Swift Affliction on this because of the duration reduction. It could work. I'm not saying it can't work, but I don't really like it that much. The other thing I could use here is efficacy support. Efficacy support would be better than chance to bleed in terms of upsides, but it has a tremendous drawback, which is the intelligence requirement on it. This character is not smart. Volatility support is next. This is something I only picked up when I got a 6-link, and it is something that's really good, especially in conjunction with Rezatha's Coil, which I don't have. I could afford Rezatha's Coil, but then doing so would brick a number of my defenses on the character, and that's a problem. So if I was to swap off this amazing belt that I got from the boats, then I would end up losing out on fire and lightning resistances. They'd be undercapped. I'd have to address that somewhere, and I'll burn that bridge when I get to it. I haven't yet got there. Boots are terrible, absolutely terrible. These are something I found early in progression. Only thing I've done is applied one useful Eldritch Implicit to them. A right ring is pretty bad as well. In fact, it's absolute rubbish. And then we have the gloves, which are something that are a work in progress. I need the Chaos Res Cold Res set up on these, but obviously gain 1 mana per enemy killed is terrible. So I'm looking to apply Deafening Essences of either Envy or Deafening Essences of Cold. What's cold on that? I think it may be Hatred. I need to apply those in order to make these better, but for now, this is a perfectly serviceable set of kit. That's basically what we're looking at. Don't copy my flasks. My flasks are bad. They work for me right now because I'm trying to work out whether or not I can fit a tincture in the build, and also I am running a bunch of 0 regen maps. If you're running 0 regen maps, you kind of have to have a mana flask. If you're running Baran maps, you need to have a mana flask. That's why I have a large pool of unreserved mana currently as well, is because I am running those. If I decide to stop running those, then we'll get rid of them. But then we've just got rubbish like, you know, corrupted blood cleanse. This could be fixed with a different setup instead, and that would require me to have a dual slot that I could use for a classic duel, which I don't currently have. But with a little bit of rejigging around and potentially a level or 3, I'd be able to do that. That'd be a big upgrade because then I could drop down to 1 Quicksilver Flask, and then I could also potentially drop down to 1 Life Flask as well, and then have 2 flask slots open, one of which might actually be a bleed tincture. So a lot of things there that are potential upgrades. I thought I would demonstrate what the build looks and feels like right now. Otherwise, I think that's basically everything we wanted to showcase. I'll leave it there. I'll put a link to the path of building as the character currently is. Just be aware that that is with all of the caveats that we've mentioned. This is not a finished build. It's not a build guide. It's just where I am currently. May your Varlobs have interesting results.